As a producer, how many times have you been told you have a story to share? Go share it, but are left wondering exactly what that story is, exactly how to go about sharing it, and if it's even worth your time? Do we have an answer for you?
Elevate Ag is an online course and community where farmers, ranchers, and other producers can come together to access the tools and information they need to craft, share, and monetize their own personal ag story.
Our online course is unlike any out there. Sharing about agriculture has its unique challenges and opportunities, and until now, no course was addressing them. Elevate Ag was created by us, a rancher and a dairy farmer, specifically for you, our agriculture community.
Save time, frustration, and uncertainty by joining our online course and community. With the tools in this course, you're able to grow your business and monetize. To learn more about our course, visit our website, elevateyouragstory.com. Welcome to Elevate the Podcast, a storytelling and business podcast where we highlight and mastermind entrepreneurs in the agricultural, Western, and rural space.
We're your hosts, Natalie Kovarik
and Tara Vanderdusen.
And today's episode is a mastermind episode where we help an entrepreneur just like you assess, optimize, and strategize their business or brand live on the air.
Created by agriculture for agriculture, we open doors for the rural, Western, and agricultural entrepreneur so they can elevate themselves, their businesses, and the lifestyles that we all love. Today, we are speaking with Meghan Gates. Meghan is a wife and mother of two living out on the Oklahoma plains. Her passion for ranching combined with all things homesteading paint the picture of a true old-fashioned Western lifestyle. Armed with skills passed down from generations, Meghan is passionate about educating others on how to better grow, raise, preserve, and cook their own food. When she's not juggling kids, you can find her elbows deep in a pie, attempting a new skill, or talking to God while horseback.
Like many, Meghan started sharing online with one goal in mind and is now looking to grow her brand, diversify her income, and expand her business. What started as simply sharing her homesteading life has slowly turned into brand work, an apparel line, and most recently, the launch of a course with thoughts of pivoting to YouTube. With so many changes, Meghan is here today to brainstorm what most of us are asking ourselves. How do we successfully pivot our businesses? Tune in to today's podcast episode as we talk all things about shifting from selling for others to selling for ourselves.
Welcome, Meghan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to be talking about two different things today, but let's start with talking about your course. So if you want to share a little bit about that to get us started.
Definitely. So I do a lot of homesteading things, have a lot of different kind of irons in the fire in terms of skills and trying to teach others about homesteading and growing and raising their own food. And I got so many messages and so many questions in my inbox about specifically raising meat chickens. And so I have done a bunch of research, haven't found anything of the like. And so I decided to go ahead and dive in and create an online course surrounding learning the process of raising meat chickens all the way from a day-old hatchling up into your freezer. So I've got that kind of going in the mix right now.
Okay, great. Do you have any specific questions that we want to start with then?
I do. So timing things out in regards to when should I open pre-sales? When should I start creating more of a buzz? When should I start more frequently talking about it? When should I actually launch the course? When should I make the content go live? The whole timeline thing. And this is also time sensitive to myself because I have to record content and video footage of the actual process of chickens, which will not be here until the start of April. So I am kind of limited to that time constraint also, knowing that the chickens take, 8 weeks to fully mature. And so I won't get all of the content even recorded to be able to have content go live until late or early mid-June probably. And so I'm just I'm not sure about how to do the timing and how to not bombard people too early.
So I will say one thing that if I have learned anything about watching people successfully launch things, it is that they always bring their community along for the journey. So I don't think you can ever, and now this is not talking like strategic, like, selling through emails or like having, certain posts that are like selling. But I don't think you can ever start too early about bringing your community along for the journey. So I think you could start now. They want to see you like ordering the chickens. They want to see the chickens arriving. They want to like get to see when they're like, you could start sharing in a non-strategic, just literally bringing people along so they feel a part of it. I always say the sooner the better. The longer you can bring people along for that ride, I feel like the more invested they are, the more they're ready for when the course actually launches. I just think the sooner the better.
For Natalie and I personally, we started our first story that we shared together about our course, not giving very much details, but just kind of the beginning, was back in November, and our course will beta launch at the beginning of March. So it was a significant amount of time that we've been talking about it. And what I'm always surprised is how many people still are like, oh, I've seen you share like a little bit about that. Like, there's just so many people that don't necessarily see every story. And so it may feel like you're bombarding them, but really like they're only seeing so much of what you're putting out there.
And there are like getting into the strategic part. So like Tara said, back in November is when we first were just like, hey, we have something exciting, like guess what it is? And just like kind of just casually brought people along and introduced them and, made that storyline. There are different ways to do it. We chose to do a 4-week? 4 weeks out was when we started like strategically sending out an email, like asking people to be on our email list, like announcing the launch. So we went with the 4-week strategic selling beforehand. So for you, that would, if you're launching for the course and you're in June, May would be when you'd want to like really hit it hard, strategically selling, like having your sales pitches, outline the emails and all that thing. But I think you could start sharing just about it generally now.
So to back up a little bit about kind of where our timeline was, like I said, we started in November. Then in January, we definitely started sharing more in stories more often. And then February, so 1 month out, was again, like Natalie said. So that 8 weeks out, we definitely were talking about it regularly, but then we were strategic about it starting 4 weeks out.
Okay. And is that 8 and 4 weeks out from the content going live, or did you guys do a pre-sale at all?
So we took the route of doing a beta launch. So the beta launch will be limited how many people can buy it. So it's kind of like our pre-launch. It's just a little bit different. They'll actually have access to the course right away, but it'll give us a chance to get some feedback before we do our like big launch later on. And so yeah, that pre-launch or beta launch will be the one that's at the beginning of March. So the 4 and 8 weeks out.
When we had talked about doing a pre-launch, I don't know why I'm so odd. I just don't get pre-launches, like how the people will sell for a few days before at a lower price. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So I've been planning and thinking about maybe doing a pre-sale 4 weeks before the content goes live and the course actually launches for regular sale at a lower price, to obviously incentivize people at a lower price and everything, but also kind of get money in my pocket and monetize my time and my energy and the work that I'm putting into it when you do all the work at the beginning. You know what I mean?
So I think there's a couple of ways to think about this. Is one, I know some people do a pre-launch before they ever record the video and before they prepare the course. So that way that they can have some money coming in while they're preparing the course. They can also gauge what the interest is and get feedback. If in your case, it sounds like you're going to have already recorded a lot of it. So it kind of like for us, the reason we decided to do a beta launch versus a pre-sale is the beta launch, we actually wanted feedback so that when we did our big launch, we had feedback from students saying, we'd love for you to expand maybe a little bit more on this topic or, talk a little bit more. So we could go back and record more information, remove information that maybe wasn't valuable before we do that big launch. And so I think it's just kind of different ways of thinking about like the same goal. In my mind, the pre-sale, it sounds like you're already going to have the course prepared is what you're thinking for the pre-sale. So your pre-sale would be more in the strategy of that you want like an early bird special to get people in that door in the first couple of days or, the week leading up to the big launch. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, but I'm also open to rethinking that strategy. I think that so much of it is also dependent on the type of course you have. So is my course the kind of course where it would benefit more from something like a pre-sale and trying to just get the numbers up as much as possible? Or would it benefit more from having feedback of people and doing more of a beta launch type thing?
I would say since the reason that this course came to be about, and this is obviously my opinion and Natalie can expand on it, but the reason this course came to be about is because of how many DMs you were getting and how many questions you were getting. I think it could be valuable to do a beta launch where you actually had a certain amount of students go through the course. And this, for us, our beta launch is really our MVP, so our most viable product. So we plan on tweaking things, changing things like I mentioned, and then putting, input from the students that have already gone through it. So for you, you may end up with a lot of questions that you may not have considered. And obviously you've probably done your research, you've gathered questions already you've gotten. That would be an opportunity to get some more insight and information on, what did you need to touch more on and what could you have shared shared less on? Or is there something that you missed altogether? And so I think having that feedback could be really valuable for the style of course that you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think the other thing, so let's say you decide not to do the beta launch and you decide to do like the pre-launch route. I guess my personal opinion and advice I would give is instead of knocking the price down, I would just offer something that you would charge for in the future, or essentially an add-on. That way you're not taking the hit with, monetization wise and losing money out of your pocket. Cause that's why the pre-launch, like I have a little bit of an issue with it. Cause it's like all those people that are so excited they're going to hit your pre-launch, they would have bought, a week later at that higher price. So you're just losing that difference in between. So maybe instead of offering it at a lower early bird price, you could offer like, hey, you get like a Zoom follow-up with me, or access to like something that everyone else wouldn't, and use the early bird special that way as an incentive, like an add-on, and that way you're not taking the money hit.
So another possible add-on is, Natalie mentioned, a Zoom where people could ask you, like a Q&A. It could also be like a Facebook community if Facebook is something you're into. And then the community aspect of Facebook is obviously you would have, the people within the community would also be supporting each other, answering questions, sharing how their experience was for them raising chickens and what was going on with that side of things. And so there's a couple of different ways that you could go about offering like an add-on, as Natalie said, without necessarily taking a hit to what you ultimately want to sell your course at.
Definitely. For the course, I mean, this is all new to me. I haven't designed a course. I haven't made a course before. And so I'm kind of just jumping in with what little knowledge that I have on my own, because I don't really have a whole bunch of friends who have made courses either. But so my vision for this course is that it's a one-time fee. It's not a monthly membership or anything. And it's a lifetime access to it, because I want to make sure that people are able to revisit it as they go through the process of raising their chickens in real time. If they have any questions while they're going through the process, is that the smarter way to price that? Or would it be better to do it more as like a monthly membership kind of a thing?
I think it's pretty standard to do I think they're actually they're two different things in my mind. So one is like a monthly membership, and it's more of like almost like a community, and then there's the online course. So I'm sure there's a ton of courses out there, but I feel like the norm for an online course is to pay like the flat rate fee versus joining like almost like a community you're creating for the monthly membership. From outside eyes, I think it totally changes things, not so much on the other person's end, because I think you'll get people who would probably buy both ways. I think it really changes things on your end as the content producer. If people are going to be paying a monthly membership, they're going to be expecting new content monthly that they're going to be able to use. So that is more work on your end, at least from my eyes on the outside, without further diving, like, the back end of what you envisioned all of this to be versus like a one-time course launch. Like you're just recording, you put it out, it's done, it's very clean. The monthly membership, I feel like you would have to be basically doing things monthly with your community. So it's just going to be a lot more work.
So I'll expand on that a little bit. I like the flat fee for the actual course. And then I like having a community like Facebook or Zoom sessions being an upsell, and then pricing those as two different ways. If the Facebook community, say that's the route you go, is going to be kind of just self-guided, that community, those people are there to help each other. You pop in maybe every once in a while, but there's not a real strong commitment from you to be there, as Natalie said, creating new content. Then that is also just a one-time fee to join that or have, X amount of Zoom sessions. If you want to be a part of that community with them, giving them advice, being on this journey with them as they do things, be able to help them, be sharing, your content, giving them kind of behind the scenes private access to what it's like on your farm and ranch and what you guys are doing, then I would have it be a monthly subscription. So I think it just depends, exactly like Natalie said, how much input are you wanting to be in continuing to create content?
See, and the flat rate course was attractive to me for the reason of doing a whole bunch of work up front and then just kind of maintaining, updating, responding to emails as people are going through the course. And so I think that what I'm envisioning is less of the community monthly membership kind of a thing, and more of just the one-time pay up front. You can do the course at your own pace and you always have access to it, but I'm not like actively putting new content in.
And I think just, again, going back to like MVP and just starting where we can, just because you start with it as a one-time course doesn't mean like in 4 months after you like figured out, like streamlined everything, you got the questions back, like there were no questions or there were, and you, whatever you had to make tweaks to that initial course, you feel like it's like wrapped up and in a present. And you're like, okay, that's done. I feel really confident about handling that. That doesn't mean to be like, then you couldn't launch the community where you're like, hey, anyone who is now a part, bought the course, maybe you even use them as a beta and you're like, hey, for 3 months, we're going to trial this, and you work that out. I mean, I feel like sometimes we think that like what we initially launch or put out into the world has to be like our final product. And that's definitely not true. I mean, everything is always a work in progress, and no one's going to be like, hey, Megan, you started that as a one-time course. What do you think you're doing now? Like change, I mean, we're ultimately, as a business owners, we have freedom to do whatever we want. So I think don't feel like just because you start one way doesn't mean you can't change that eventually.
I'm a part of a e-course that I signed up for, and then had a Facebook community, and it was like kind of set up as it would be forever. And now they have decided to go back and make it where it got really big. The Facebook community is huge. It's taking a lot of work. They have like a full-time person that like moderates it. And so they have decided to go back and say, if you would like to continue being a part of this, it's a monthly subscription, and it's a little dicey. So like it is something to think about, but as Natalie said, there you can make changes. And so I just think kind of keep it in the back of your mind of what your options are, and kind of word it maybe strategically how you word things. This is going to be a Facebook community for, this launch in forever, but we may add on different features, and that there may be continued growth in other places. So I think just being conscientious of the fact that you may take it someplace else is always important.
Definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense.
I think that it makes a lot of sense I know as content creators, we can constantly feel like we're always putting out content. We're always having to be sharing. And so one of the nice things that I think, is attractive about an e-course for a lot of us is that passive income, exactly like what you mentioned, of just not feeling like you have to put out something every day, but instead do a lot of work up front.
Are you doing an open and close launch, or are you just going evergreen right away?
I'm leaning towards keeping it open all the time, but I don't know if that's the right strategy for this specific course.
I personally like, the way we went with this to have open and closed for Natalie and I. And that way we could kind of control at first to see how many people, signed up, what the interest was. Again, we really wanted to get feedback from people and see what they thought. And then with the possibility of going evergreen later on, that was the route we took, and just felt like that was, it just gave us a little bit more control, I think, over these first few months and how it was going to go.
Yeah, I mean, when we were researching too, everyone said that, well, this still goes with like any selling, not just courses too, but like urgency is a huge factor in people making the decision to buy versus not. If there's nothing urgent about it, they're kind of like, well, just, like there's no reason to buy it. So that like open close just forces people to make that decision. Whereas if it was open, all the way from the get-go, you might, not saying that like at the end of the year, your annual sales, they might be the same, but I just think, I don't know. I mean, that was one of the reasons we chose it too.
One other reason, I have enrolled in courses that were open and closed, and in courses that were evergreen. And I feel like the content creators that create the evergreen courses do have to have a constant level of selling that course. So if you want to be selling all the time in your Instagram and on social that this course is live, then I think that evergreen makes sense. If this is something you don't want to be like talking about all the time, then doing a big push, a big launch, selling for a week or however long that you decide to sell for, can also then take the pressure off for you to go back to like sharing regular content. There may be some seasonality with this. You mentioned like how long it takes to mature the birds. So you may want to plan your launches around when it makes sense for when that would be, like when people would need to be preparing. Like, I'm going to launch this course in September because that gives people X amount of months or, whatever to prepare for the next season of birds. I don't know how that looks. I'm like, I don't know anything about growing or raising birds. So I'm sorry if I'm totally like talking not correctly here, but that's kind of how I would think about my launches versus evergreen.
No, that does make a lot of sense, Tara, because the chickens are so sensitive to the cold weather that not many people raise them in the wintertime. And so being able to have that push during, especially the springtime would be a big push for me. Yeah, I might lean more towards that then.
Excellent. There was one other topic. If you don't have any more questions about your course, maybe we can pivot a little bit and talk in our last few minutes about YouTube.
Definitely.
I'm going to probably let Natalie take the lead on YouTube since I don't have a YouTube channel, but I hope I can still share some insights and information. But if you want to start with a question or where you were at with this.
So my husband, Cody, and I have been talking, going back and forth about starting a YouTube channel for a while now. We have the potential to create so much video content and educational videos, and Cody wants to do more entertainment type videos. He's the humorous one of us, and I'm not funny at all, and so he can just take the lead on that. But I know that YouTube pays you for the videos, but that's basically all that I know about YouTube. I know that consistency is a good thing, but like I'm starting with a blank slate. I don't know what the best way to divide your energy between YouTube and the other social media channels are as far as content creation. I don't know if it's best to double down on content as far as like you make, a post or a reel for Instagram and use that same content in a different light for a YouTube video, or if it needs to be a completely different thing. I feel like I should stop talking because
No, these are all great questions, and they're questions that anyone who is listening to this has. So I'm glad you asked them all. To start back where you said monetization, because I feel like that's always the big one that people have questions on. So yes, YouTube just automatically pays you. It goes directly into your bank account. You have to get 1,000 followers and you have to have, I think, 5,000 or 4,000 watch hours. Gosh, I probably should have looked that up again. It's been a while. But anyway, the watch hours is what actually I feel like intimidates most people. They're like, oh my gosh, that seems so long. But going to your consistency, you had mentioned actually, if you are creating content, you get to those watched hours so quickly. It's really about kind of building the follower base first. But that's the beautiful thing about it. Once you hit those two milestones per YouTube, they just pay you monthly, it goes into your bank account, and it's just calculated per the ads that are put into your videos.
Something I did learn last week interviewing Zach Johnson for our e-course, he's our YouTube expert. He said, make sure you set up the back end of the monetization because he didn't realize that he wasn't getting paid for a while, or like he hadn't set up the back end. So that's just another little piece of the monetization, is actually connecting it to your bank account so that it's automatic.
It's fairly easy though. You register in the back end and then they send you a pin in the mail and then you have to put that pin in. So I was actually really stressed about like waiting for it in the mail. I was like, Luke, don't throw anything away. But as far as like growing on YouTube, and I do think there could be maybe an interesting component about using YouTube maybe to drive those sales to your course or like connecting them somehow. The hard thing about YouTube with me, and that I found, I I originally started out, I cranked out content and I had a very consistent presence, and that it was easy for me. Looking back, I don't know how, but it was easy somehow for me to sit down and film and edit and upload. I was doing probably like, I was trying to do about every 2 days, 2 to 3 days to have a new video uploaded, which again, I don't know how I did that. And that's kind of where I hit my burnout and YouTube became hard for me, is because you had mentioned about repurposing content, and YouTube has to be in horizontal, and, Instagram Reels, or most of content on Instagram or TikTok, all of that's vertical. And so it is kind of, YouTube has shorts now, which I know a lot of people repurpose their Reels or TikToks into YouTube shorts. But before that, when I was really active on it, there was none of the shorts, and it was really hard for me to repurpose content. And I just found it really hard to show up for my Instagram community at the same time as showing up for my YouTube community.
I will say some crossover that has been mentioned to me is, I know Zach talks about this, is using, he shares a lot in the moment. His Instagram is in the moment and his YouTube is in the moment. So his Instagram post that he uses, like the photo for an Instagram post, he uses that for like the thumbnail for the YouTube. And so he tries to come up with some ways that it's overlapping of content. And so not necessarily the video component, but some of the photos and things like that.
The other thing, I never did this, but I know a lot of people, the trick around this is like to like shooting form. So they'll have one camera station that, is catching them the footage of doing stuff that they can speed up, or whatever it is, and they'll leave that one running. But I think a lot of people's workaround for that is having like multiple films going at one time so that they can kind of shift camera angles and stuff like that while, turning vertical and horizontal on the other phone.
And I think that makes a lot of sense for your big moments where you're like, I absolutely want to capture this like for both or multiple platforms.
Yeah, definitely.
But going back, that's why I do think going back when you had said like there's a lot of opportunity for educational YouTube. Think of YouTube as like the search engine that it is. People go there for one, like the two things you literally said. They either go there to figure out how to do something. So they're typing in, like you would say, like how to, I don't know. What do you do to birds, Megan?
How to raise birds.
Yeah.
That would be what I would type in.
So that's why I do think that there's maybe a really interesting component for you to drive to those sales, because people who are actually typing in, like, how do I do this, are going to be like, YouTube would serve that more than like, content on Instagram is going to, or content, on TikTok, because again, there's that search component of YouTube, and education is such a huge one for YouTube, as well as entertainment. So Cody's definitely onto something, but education is like a huge component of the YouTube platform.
And with YouTube, setting yourself up really as the expert with those how-to videos, like then it's going to encourage followers that are looking for something about raising meat birds. Like once it establishes you, YouTube algorithm establishes you as the expert, then they're going to send people that are like, oh, this person probably wants to find Meghan. And so that would be, making sure that your content is putting you as that person.
Yeah, definitely. Do you guys think that having the educational side from me plus more entertainment stuff from Cody on the same channel makes sense?
Yeah, I don't think it would be like a detriment to your community. I think we really train our community, honestly, like from the beginning. I think it would maybe like if all of a sudden you guys were doing educational the whole time, and then all of a sudden you guys switched to like doing community, and they'd be like, wait, what's going on? But I think if that is how your platform was rolled out from the beginning, is like, hey, we're actually a kind of a combination of both, like our marriage, like serious and educational and witty and lighthearted. And they just knew that that's what they expected from your YouTube channel. I don't think there'd be any issues with both contents.
I second that.
And how much content do you think I should have stacked up, ready to go in the queue before I would actually, per se, launch a YouTube channel?
Oh gosh, I don't think you necessarily, I guess it depends on the approach you're taking. Again, I guess we train our audience. So there are YouTube, channels out there that are like new video once weekly on Wednesdays, 4 p.m. I have always told people to think of YouTube as almost like a television show. So people want to know when they can sit down and watch you. So it's literally the same thing. Like I know, Seinfeld is on Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. It's like, I know Meghan Gates is on, Wednesdays at whatever. So there's that approach where you can like do the weekly. And there's other people that just crank it out and are trying to, keep their audience engaged the whole time. And so that's the approach I took at the beginning, was every 2 to 3 days. So whether you want to have that batched, ahead of time so that you can launch, I didn't do anything ahead of time. I just launched my first one and then just like kept, uploading and editing and recording while I was just doing the ball as it was rolling. So I didn't have anything pre-prepared, but you could definitely go that route.
And kind of like wrapping up the two things together here. Obviously, if you're going to be getting content for your course, it's going to be horizontal. It's going to be educational. It's going to be you explaining things. I think as far as recycling content, there could be opportunity to recycle content between YouTube and your course and vice versa. That's where I really see kind of like that overlap as far as content goes. Another great coaching conversation. We truly believe that we have so much to learn from one another, because while our businesses may be different, what we as entrepreneurs experience as leaders of our business are infinitely similar in nature.
You guys know at the end of every episode, we like to summarize the discussion and advice given during that episode into a few main takeaways so that you can try to implement them to grow your own brand or business. This week, it was all things YouTube and launching an e-course. Our best advice for anyone launching a course would to be not get overwhelmed with all the dates, pricing, and all the other details there are to launching a course. Just go ahead and pick what works best for you and your course.
Thanks again to Meghan for coming on the podcast today. If you are interested in submitting yourself to be mentored on the podcast like Meghan was, please go to elevateyouragstory.com/podcast and fill out the form to submit yourself. We'd love to have you on air with us.
And don't forget, we also love connecting with you. Subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review to help more rural business entrepreneurs find us. Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.